Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I wanted to share with you some work that I've been doing here on the Piedmont Southern layout. I've gotten a lot of track work and roadbed laid here in the town of Amherst, and then I'm going to take you around the corner to the little community of Tye River. And on that section, I haven't laid track yet. I've got the roadbed down, I've got turnouts in place, I've got my magnets for magnetic uncoupling down there, and I want to give you some tips on laying track and roadbed and the like and getting everything in place and ready to finalize the track work in a large section of your layout. So let's go ahead and take a look at laying flex track here on the Piedmont Southern. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Well, I felt so good last Friday that I went out to a local train show, and I ran into a number of viewers who approached me. I even had one who wanted to take a selfie photo with me. So it was nice to meet you guys out there at the train show here in Asheville. And then on the way out the door, I ran into a group of 4 guys, and one of them said, "Hey, Larry." And I looked at him because I didn't know who he was. I'll be honest with you. I'd never met the guy before, but it was Nick Santo from Vermont, the developer of the Decoder Buddy. So Nick and I had a chance to sit there or stand there and talk for a few minutes and catch up. And he was one of the last persons in the world that I would have expected to run into at a train show in Asheville in the middle of February. But there he was. So thanks a lot, Nick, and I hope you have a good trip back to Vermont. Okay, I've moved in close here so we can take a look first at Amherst. And Amherst is a small community located about 8 miles north of Monroe Yard, which itself is about 8 miles north of Lynchburg. So we're about 16 miles north of the town of Lynchburg in Virginia. And there's a couple of small stations in between Monroe and Amherst, but this is the first one of any consequence. So Amherst is a nice little area. It's limited in scope, so it makes a great local switching area. And now I'll zoom in and we'll take a closer look in a minute. But first, let's get an overview. You can see basically we've got 3 tracks here. We've got a northbound and a southbound main, plus a passing siding there where the 2 40-foot boxcars are sitting. And if we go on back down here, you can see this large sweeping curve, and that comes around from Monroe Yard itself. So you go from Monroe, and the first stop on the Piedmont Southern layout is Amherst, coming out of Monroe Yard. Okay, so then let's go ahead and move in a little bit closer. Okay, so the first thing, coming northbound, and that's coming towards me, there's a crossover that takes you into the passing siding. And that passing siding, as I pointed out, is where I've got these 2 40-foot boxcars. And then you'll notice that there is an industrial spur coming off of that siding. So there's a mill located down in that area with access from the railroad. And so I had decided to include that. It might not be exactly like I have set it up here, but it's in that general area. There's room back there for about 2 40-foot cars, maybe a flat car, something like that. So it's a nice little pocket area for some local switching. And then on the back side there's another track that goes to a team track as well as the freight depot. And then right over here, right behind the 2 boxcars, and I'll zoom in a little bit more for that, right behind these 2 boxcars is where the passenger station will be located. Now if we move on up, you'll notice that we've got room here on this extension of the back track for about 4 pulp racks. And one of the stories that Bill Cox told me that he remembered as a child going with his father and one of the farm hands down to the station to unload the truck load of pulp logs, and that would be loaded onto these pulp racks here. So I've included room for 4 pulp racks for this. And as I said in the past, pulpwood has been a big part of the farm economy in that area for many years, and there's lots of these. There were always lots of these little sidings where pulp could be loaded into these pulpwood flats. Okay, so I moved the passenger cars out of the way so you can see the turnouts that go back to that back track, as well as the southbound, the northbound, and the passing siding in that order. So that's how they're set up. So this area has already been, the track's already been laid. I still have to do all the wiring, but all of the turnouts are in place. All of the feeders for the turnouts for the frogs are in place. So all I have to do now is install the tortoise switch machines, run the wires, and do all of that stuff, and I can start running trains. The next thing, before I get busy with doing any scenic work here on the layout, you'll note that there is no backdrop in the back. So I've got to finish the backdrop back there, and then I can start doing the scenery work. Okay, let's move on to the next town, which is not as far as long as this. So I'll give you some tips on what I'm doing back there. Now, the next town that we're going to take a look at is Tye River. And it's north of Amherst, about 8 miles north of Amherst. And it is interesting because it had an interchange with the Blue Ridge Railway. And the Blue Ridge Railway ran from the community of Tye River on back up to about the Blue Ridge Parkway, and served a mine up there and a community that did a lot of farm work. They produced a lot of baskets for apples and other fruit. If you look here, you'll see off to the right, where the track comes north towards me, it splits. And the first track going off to the right is the connection to the Blue Ridge Railway interchange. And the next one coming towards the camera is the northbound main, and the one here out at the edge of the layout, that's the southbound main. So there's a little bit of a divergence there, but it all comes back together here in a minute. And we'll come back to this here because there's some things I want to show you. But let's take a look first at the rest of Tye River. So if we look in here, you'll have to excuse the mess because I've got tools still laid out and track laid out, and I'm ready to go on with this work. But you'll see the first thing I've done here is I've laid all of my road bed, gotten it down good and solid. You can see my liquid nails for projects gun there, waiting to lay some track, and that's what I use for laying all of my road bed and the like. Now, one of the things that some people have asked me about laying road bed, what about just laying it straight on the foam? Well, you can do that. You can lay it straight on foam. You can lay it straight on plywood. I like to use the cork. It helps deaden the sound a bit. Plus, it gives you that prototype profile of the actual roadbed out on the railroad. If you've ever gone out there, you've probably noticed that you have to climb up quite a bit of gravel, typically, in order to get to the actual level of the rails. And that's by design because it provides a lot of drainage, gets water away from the rails and the roadbed. It helps extend the life of those wooden ties, and it also just provides good drainage for the roadbed itself. And very often you will see at the base of the roadbed, the railroad will have provided a drainage ditch to get that water away from the roadbed. So it's all part of the profile. And I know people that actually will stack these cork sections up too deep in order to get an even greater profile, or they'll use some other kind of material that's even thicker to get a higher profile. So that's one of the things. If you're interested in actually duplicating your favorite prototype railroad, I suggest you go out and walk along a real railroad somewhere and get a feeling for just how steep the ballast is and the roadbed for the railroad. Okay, so that's why I use cork. After I put the cork down, the next thing that I do, and let's move up a little bit and I'll show you this. Now you can see a couple of things here that I wanted to point out to you. So the first thing I've done is after I laid my roadbed, I've installed these magnets that go underneath of the track. And if you want to look back to a previous video I did on various ways of using under the track magnets, I'll put some links to those above me here and at the end of the video because I have done a couple of videos on that. But at any rate, I tend to like to use these guys here on my HO. Back in the Amherst area, though, I'm using the neodymium super magnets that I used on the module. And I'll try to remember to put a link to that as well because those really work very well. The downside of using the neodymium magnets is they're only about a ½ inch long, so you have a much narrow window of opportunity to get those KDs to uncouple. But this does give you a very good magnetic uncoupling capability. So I do install these in an opening that I cut out. And one thing to remember about this is you want to be back at least 1 car length from your curved section, because in order for the KDs to uncouple properly, they need to be on a straight section of track. So this is the straight section here. If you had one car here and another car here and a magnet here, it might not uncouple reliably because they're on a curve and they're not aligned linearly, and they won't uncouple sometimes. So that's one thing to remember, one tip. And then right after that, this is one of my microengineering turnouts. This, I believe, is a number 6, and it leads off of the southbound main onto the pulp track. And it has room for about 5 of those 40-foot pulp racks that I use. And if you look back there in the back, you can see a turnout that leads to the interchange track with the Blue Ridge Railway. And that's too so that, you can push in one set of cars and pull out another, or various other maneuvers. And again, we have the magnets for uncoupling those cars. And that runs down. There's room, I believe, for about 10 40-foot cars located on that. And then down at the far end, it's just going to terminate, disappear into some trees, which is what it did on the prototype interchange track down there. And back in this section here, we will have a freight depot and a passenger depot located between the passing siding and the Blue Ridge Railway interchange track. And then further on, you can see we've got our southbound main, our northbound main, and a passing siding here. So plenty of room for the local to pull off out of the way and do his work. And at each end of the passing siding, another magnet is set into the roadbed so that he can uncouple the cars that he needs to place on the pulp loading track. Or there's another track right out here, this extension of the main line that goes out, and there will be a cannery located here with this spur track here with room for about 4 cars. So that's how that works. And then it disappears over into the hole in the wall that goes back to the helix, which leads up to the upper deck. Okay, let's go back down to where the Blue Ridge Railway interchange begins. And I'll give you a tip about laying flex track on curves. Now, as I told you earlier, this turnout here is on the northbound main. And this section here, this diverging leg here, goes to the Blue Ridge Railway interchange track up here. Now, what I want to show you, though, is a little trick for laying flex track on curves, because there's a little problem that can happen if you're not very careful. When you do go about laying these on a curve, one thing you have to look out for is kinks. Now, this particular track here is one that is ready to be glued in place, cemented in place. And you'll note that when I move this track, this section stays in perfect alignment, and it has a nice free-flowing curvature. So it provides a perfect extension of the curvature of this curved turnout. And this is one of the Walther's curved turnouts that I did that I reviewed a number of months ago. Now this one back here, this one I've put in place with rail joiners. And one thing you'll notice that when you move these in order to put them into the proper location, you're going to get a kink forming. And that's something that you don't want. You don't want any kinks, because that will lead to derailments. And unfortunately, I've seen this occur on a number of layouts where people did not do what I'm going to show you to do. So what you need to do is, and you can see the kink here that's forming as I go around this curve. What you need to do is take your piece of flex track and run it out straight from the end of the turnout. Insert it into your rail joiners and then solder this in place. And then once this has been soldered in place, you can move this into position, and it is going to form a nice free-flowing curve through the connection here. So by soldering it in place, you make it essentially like welded rail that is used on the prototype railroad today. And it does give you this nice curve section here that cars and locomotives will go through quite easily. Whereas if you were to put this in place and tack it down, there's a good chance that you're going to get derailments at this kink right here that will form. And you not only want to do this at turnouts, if you were in the middle of a curve and you ran out of track, then you would probably want to extend that piece of track by soldering the rail joiners to the track, and then bending it into the curved orientation that you want it to be in. And, by the way, if at a future time you need to remove this, you can just heat this up and pull it out, and you can get these rail joiners off of there without too much issue. So even if you want to build this so that you can reuse your track, I still recommend that you solder your rails and your rail joiners together. Now, on a large part of these long runs here, these long straight runs, I do leave a free-floating set of rail joiners about midway through the run. And the reason for that is so that they will be free to contract if it gets very cold down here. You can also just leave a little bit of a gap in there in case it gets hot and they need to expand. But no matter what you want it to be able to do, you have to leave at least one joint in a very, very long section of track like this in order to allow them to be able to expand or contract. And right here is an example of what I'm talking about. I've left a little tiny gap here, and this rail joiner I'm going to leave unsoldered and free so that I can allow expansion and contraction to occur. And, I tend to do that every 2 or 3 of these sections of flex track. Remember, flex track is about 3 feet long, so that's about every 6 to 9 feet. I would leave an expansion or contraction joint like this one here. And then the rest of them, I would go ahead and I would solder them in place. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed a look and update on the work that I've been doing here at Amherst and at the community of Tye River around the corner here, and the tips that I gave you about laying cork roadbed as well as inserting the magnets in place and getting your turnouts all laid out. Hopefully that will all be of some use to you. And don't forget to solder the rail joiners to the rails so that you'll get a nice free-flowing movement through those curves, and you won't end up with a bunch of kinks and derailments, because those kind of things can be very difficult to fix after the fact. So have a great weekend and a great week, and hopefully I'll see you here with another video from the DCC Guide soon. Bye now.